This is Talk to Seattle, and I'm host, Jason Rigden. On this episode, we have Egan Orion, who's running for Seattle City Council in the 3rd District. How are you today?
Hello. I'm good. How's it going?
I'm doing pretty good. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, maybe your background and experience?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a fourth-generation District 3 resident. My grandparents used to live on Broadway on Capitol Hill in the 1930s, and my mom was raised in the Mount Baker neighborhood. I came to live in the district in the early 90s when I came out and enjoyed the Pride Parade and Pride Festival that was on Capitol Hill in those days. And I bought a house and really settled into the district in the early 2000s. So I've been in the Central District for about 30 years. And I am the founder and the producer of the Pride Festival. That I started that in 2007 down at Seattle Center. So it'll be our 13th year at the end of the month. We also took over Pride Fest Capitol Hill a few years ago. So really involved in community building. I've also been running the Broadway Business Improvement Area. So I'm an advocate for small business and vibrant, healthy commercial corridors as well.
So it sounds like you've had a lot of involvement with the community. What made you decide to run for this office in particular?
You know, with my work on Capitol Hill with the businesses, when I started that work, we had just lost our homeless outreach funding. So we no longer had social workers that could interact with homeless folks on the Hill. And so one of my first tasks was figuring out, first of all, were there resources that we could utilize today for our businesses. Our businesses are really our eyes and ears on the ground because they're there throughout the day, every day. And so when they see someone in crisis, they prefer not to call 911. They would prefer to have a social worker that they can reach out to. And we did have that at one point, but that went away. So I built a coalition between my organization and other organizations on Capitol Hill. And we also worked with First Hill and Chinatown ID. We came together as a group and we figured out what we needed, came up with a plan, and petitioned the mayor's office and council. And it was a long, hard slog, but in the end, we ended up getting funding for 3 full-time workers, one for each of our neighborhoods. But in that process, we had to interact with council a lot. Normally, in a district system, you would reach out to your council member and get their support, and they would be able to help you figure out how to navigate the system at City Hall. But with Shama Sawant, we reached out to her office to try to arrange a meeting time and time again with her, and she was unresponsive to that, and I found that really frustrating. I came to learn that for organizations and residents on Capitol Hill, they really have to go around Councilmember Sawant in order to really have their voice represented at City Council. And I'm a good government guy. I want things to work the way that they're intended. If I'm voting in a district council member, I want to make sure that if there's something important that needs to be on their radar that I need them to advocate for and to work with me on at council, that they are responsive to those needs. And so that's why I'm running, is because I think that Seattleites are ready for a council that can really get to work on the big issues that face our city right now. And there's some really big challenges. And I think having a council member from District 3 that can work with other council members, that can work with the mayor, that can respond to constituents, I think is going to be part of the solution to getting things done at City Council.
This idea that the council hasn't really been responsive to the citizens is kind of a recurring theme on this show. Do you have any ideas why that perception exists?
Well, I think the perception exists because it's the reality on the ground. And, you know, we're a growing city. I think that, you know, one of our issues is that we have not really harnessed our prosperity as well as we could over the last 7 or 8 years. I think part of the problem with council is that we switched 3.5 years ago, we switched from an at-large system for all 9 council members to a district system where there are 7 members that represent districts and there are 2 at-large council members. I think in that switch, you saw representatives like Councilmember Sawant, who came from an at-large system and then had to pivot to a district system. And many of them were not successful at that pivot. And, my perspective on city council is that I think that oftentimes they get mired in ideology and don't see clearly what the goal is that they're trying to achieve. I think also city council should be a collaborative body. I think you need to have a coalition in order to get anything done. And I'll speak specifically to my criticisms of Councilmember Sawant, but she has not done that well. I have spoken directly to current council members who say that they've only met one-on-one with her 2 or 3 times over the last 3.5 years. And in a collaborative body like City Council, that's unacceptable. She doesn't meet with the mayor as every other council member does on a monthly basis either. And the mayor is key to getting policies enacted at City Council. So I think there's been some criticisms of Councilmember Sawant that she takes her lead from the socialist alternative. And I think what happens is oftentimes they'll write policy, give it to her, she'll come to council and present it without having built a coalition or a real plan around it. And those ideas, those plans get shot down. And I think that that's the right approach. If I were the other council members, I think if you really want to get something done, you have to get other people on board with it, have a viable plan, have the support and feedback from constituents, and then you can proceed. I think that that's why Councilmember Sawant has been so ineffective these last 3.5 years. She talks a good game. She has very powerful rhetoric. But at the end of the day, your rhetoric means nothing unless you can actually get something done to advance your ideas. And she's not been able to do that these last 3.5 years. That's been clear.
And could you tell me a little bit about your district?
Sure. We have one of the most diverse districts in Seattle, home to a historic Black population, LGBTQ population. A part of our district swings through Little Saigon. We've got lots of big houses by the water. We've got lots of apartments on Capitol Hill. So there's great diversity in the types of people that live in our district, as well as the neighborhoods in which they live. And I sort of straddle both of those worlds. I live in a single-family housing community in the Central District, and I do most of my work on Capitol Hill with Pride Fest and with the Broadway Business Improvement Area. So I think that there are definitely a lot of challenges in our district, and but I think that there's also a lot of opportunity, and I'm looking forward to hopefully advancing those policies at City Council.
What do you think are the biggest challenges facing your district?
Displacement. I think both for the historic LGBTQ folks as well as Black folks who have lived in the Central District for decades. I think you're seeing the affordability crisis come home to roost in both of those neighborhoods. And I hear it nearly on a daily basis. We don't have enough affordable housing to keep a lot of people in the communities in which they've lived, worked, and played for decades. And those communities they have deep ties to. So I think there's people that would say, hey, well, why don't you move to Kent or to Linwood, right? You can get more affordable housing there. But this is where they've lived their lives. This is where their families and friends are and the services they come to rely on. So I think that we really have to address that. I think in the Central District particularly, that's been targeted for development these last these last 10, 15 years. And so you see this high degree of development in these expensive apartment buildings going up. But what's happened in the process is that people of color have been pushed out of the neighborhood. So I think that in order for us to really stop the displacement from happening, because it's really an economic redlining that just re-traumatizes that particular community, I think that we really need to look at zoning changes. And the MHA upzone is part of that process. And in my neighborhood, there were some corridors that were upzoned in the MHA policy. And so we're already seeing that there's more affordable housing and low-income housing being developed in my neighborhood. And one particular success story is at the Liberty Bank building, which was produced by Capitol Hill Housing, which is just a couple blocks away from where I live. Beautiful new building, low-income and affordable housing units. And they were able to achieve nearly 90% African-American occupancy in that building. And, I've been at forums where some people decry that because they say, we don't want people living in low-income housing. We want people to stay where they are. And I think, yes, I want that too. And so I think that we can give support, particularly to renters. We can give them legal support. We can help them bridge emergencies with emergency funding. A lot of people are just one paycheck away from not being able to pay their rent. So let's help them with that. Let's give them legal support so they can be at a level playing field with their landlords. So that should be the first step. But when people are displaced, let's keep them in the neighborhoods that they are so tied to. And I think that we can talk about the success of the Liberty Bank building model, which is an example of community preference, where folks that are from that neighborhood are prioritized for low income and affordable housing. And I think that's a good approach when displacement is unavoidable.
Yeah, people often forget that, it's not, a home isn't just the house, it's the community that surrounds it.
Absolutely. And there is a rich, diverse community that exists, both, there's separate communities, but on Capitol Hill and in the Central District. And I think one thing that people often forget as well is that displacement is happening in the business community as well. And I think years of higher and higher taxes and regulations and pressure from development has led to displacement of LGBTQ-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses. And so we have to do a better job of focusing on small businesses in our district as well. And I think, for our current council member, business has sort of been a dirty word. She says that she supports small businesses. But when I was the executive director of the Capitol Hill Chamber of Commerce, and during my tenure with the Broadway BIA, she's never engaged with our organization. And we've reached out and invited her on multiple occasions, but she doesn't know the concerns of the small business community in District 3. And that's a lens that I'll be able to bring to City Council if I were elected.
What do you think are the biggest challenges facing the city as a whole?
I think it's really around the affordability crisis. I say would be first on that list, just because it's a daily crisis for so many families. I think that what voters say is the number one issue is the homelessness crisis. And I think that is very urgent as well, because there are people that are languishing in tents and in doorways in our city, in one of the most well-resourced places on earth. And the fact that this city council, the current council, has not been able to tackle this particular problem effectively, I think this speaks to the dysfunction going on at council right now. I think that we need to have a comprehensive end-to-end plan that focuses on having enough shelter beds, first of all, for everyone, and having enough high supervision but low barrier shelter for folks. We can also look at bridge housing. Like, I'm a big fan of tiny house villages, and I think that there's other ways of sheltering people that is much better than having them in tents or living under a bridge in our city. And then finally, I think that for our chronically homeless, which number 1,500 to 2,000, I think that providing supportive housing units for them is essential. And I have a plan to use our expanded governance model with the county to bond a $500 million project for 1,500 supportive housing units that would have wraparound services with an emphasis on mental health and addiction recovery. And I think that getting that online as quickly as possible, I say we can do it within 3 years and pay that back through general funds, because we are spending that money now on our chronically homeless as we cycle them in and out of the system with no or little good outcomes that come of it. And so we have to do better by the people that are suffering the most. And my plan will do that, and we'll do that quickly. On the affordability crisis, I think that we do need to build out light density throughout Seattle. I think there's also opportunities in neighborhoods like Inner Bay and Ballard along 15th Avenue, and some places in Soto where there is a lot of property available. And so we don't necessarily have to build gargantuan buildings in communities throughout the city. I think that light density, like triplexes and duplexes, ADUs, BADUs, are good across the city. But then for these larger developments that will really make a dent in the affordability crisis, let's look at the land that's available today and use that to its best benefit, and make sure those places are connected to transit. I think there's a lot more we can do on the affordability front. The council has not planned for the prosperity that we're experiencing. It's not a matter of shaming the companies for bringing these good-paying jobs to Seattle. It's our job as a city to be able to harness that prosperity so that people don't get left behind and that we become a better city for it.
So one of the perennial issues in this area in the city has been transportation. What can the city do to help improve our transportation system?
Well, I think that there are lots of ways that we can impact transportation in the city. And first of all, having a robust relationship with King County Metro and making sure that rapid ride and dedicated bus lines that move people through the city quickly, efficiently, and cheaply should be a big priority for us. And have those dedicated bus lanes connected so we create a system throughout the entire city. I think on the same note, the connected bike lane system is important, and I will definitely support that. But here's one caveat to that. Most cyclists will ride on our major arterials, and we have a problem in Seattle. We have potholes and cracked streets throughout the city. This is where most of our cyclists ride, and they're in places that don't have a dedicated bike lane. So they're interacting with traffic while trying to go around potholes and other and uneven streets. And so I think that that's a big challenge. I am working right now on a new policy that I haven't talked about. We have greenways right now, but I want to produce something called Safeways, where we have passages for cyclists in our city that we make a commitment to as far as potholes in particular. It makes it for very unsafe biking conditions. So we're so focused on these connected bike lanes, but most of our cyclists are not riding in those bike lanes. So we need to get the basics right as a city. It's a major safety concern. We want people to take up cycling and other forms of micromobility like solo wheels and e-scooters. But in order to make that as safe as possible, we need to have smooth roads. And so my Safe Ways program would make that a priority on the streets where most of our cyclists ride. So I think that the dedicated bus lanes, the interconnected bike lanes, prioritizing fixing the roads as we have them so more people can use them. And I was just going to say on transportation, I mentioned micromobility just a minute ago. The mayor has really dragged her feet on e-scooters. E-scooters have been shown to be more easily adopted for people than the bikes that we see all around our city. And she's concerned about safety. And I think that safety should always be our number one priority when it comes to expanding transportation choices. But we can use these protected bike lanes for lots of forms of transportation. And I think with e-scooters, we have a major opportunity, both for revenue for the city, but mainly for equity in transportation, particularly for the first and the last mile for commuters. And so I know that there is a pilot being planned right now for the city. I wish that the mayor would get on board with this and with council and figure out how to speed this along. There's great technology there for areas where scooters might interact with pedestrians and car traffic and bikes. For those pinch points, the technology enables you to slow down those scooters in those areas of maximum safety concerns. So I think that is definitely something that we should be considering and making more of a priority.
So I'm sure you're aware, we live in very polarized times and the city is becoming increasingly polarized. How would you as a city leader work to bring people together?
So I've shown throughout my career that I'm a person that brings people together, whether it's working across organizations with Pride Fest to really bring the LGBTQ and allied communities together for the biggest celebration in all of Seattle, or with my work on flash mobs. I've produced over 150 flash mobs throughout the United States. And here locally, we had some of our biggest ones where we had 1,000 or 1,500 people dancing together at the same time. And so these are really positive contributions that I have led up. With the Broadway Business Improvement Area, we have over 150 businesses that are ratepayers that join together in order to make Broadway healthy, safe, and vibrant, and welcome to all. And I think that one thing that our current council member has definitely not been very good at is bringing people together. It's shown by our history with not working together with other council members, by not working with the mayor, by not coming to meet organizations or residents in the district and hearing their needs. We have a real lack of work together spirit from this current council member. And I think that I've shown throughout my career that I'm someone that will bring people together. I think that we have huge challenges in this city. And I think we need to bring all stakeholders to the table to have a voice and a discussion about how we move things forward. I think that the politics of division, derision, and demonization that Councilmember Sawant has wrought on this city and this council has been ineffective at solving the real problems that we have. And so I look forward to really bringing people together to solve our most intractable problems. I think that we have some of the most innovative minds and spirit here in the city. We are very well resourced. We are becoming a rich city. We should be able to bring all those things to bear on the challenges that we face. And I think that there's great opportunity there. And I hope to harness that opportunity to make this a shining city that I know that Seattle can be.
And if people want to learn more about your campaign, where should they go?
They can go to my website, eganforseattle.org. That's EGANFOR, Seattle.org. And if they want, there's lots of policies that are up there. But if they have questions about specific policies or want to engage me directly, they can reach me at eganforseattle.org. And I'd be happy to chat with folks.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
This has been Talk to Seattle, and I've been your host, Jason Rigden. If you want to support the show, why don't you follow us on social media? We're at Talk to Seattle on both Twitter and Instagram. Thank you for listening.